In this war of attrition, troops on both sides found that the bombed-out city was ideally suited to the infantryman's most dreaded opponent, the sniper.
The cities like Stalingrad, which had been pounded to rubble and ruin, were an absolute playground for snipers. Buildings half standing, half fallen down. There's almost an unlimited number of places a sniper could hide.
Martin Pegler of Britain's Royal Armouries has studied the German and Russian sniping tactics used in Stalingrad. The research has led him to suspect that the Soviets had the edge on their Nazi opponents. There was little to choose between the rifles that were used. The most vital piece of equipment was the telescopic sight, or scope.
The Russians put a lot of thought into the manufacture of their scopes, and they decided that these big old-fashioned turn-of-the-century hunting-type scopes were not really the way to be heading with optical technology. They came up with a much more compact, much more modern design.
But it wasn't as simple as just fixing the scope onto a weapon. Before going into action, the sniper had to be sure that the scope was properly prepared. The process is known as zeroing.
The whole point of zeroing a rifle is that when you put a scope onto it, you have to make sure that the point of impact of the bullet is exactly the same as where the crosshairs on the scope are. The only way to do that is to fire a few rounds through the rifle, and with each shot, you adjust your scope until the two meet perfectly.
Pegler believes that through this zeroing process, he may be able to show how the Soviets had an advantage. Using original World War II rifles and scopes, exactly like those used at Stalingrad, he sets up a test to see which is easier to zero. He first uses the German system with the Mauser K98 rifle.
We undo the locking screw.
The scope is well engineered, but requires a tool to adjust between shots.
On the line, 9 o'clock. 9 ring to chimney, the line. Yeah, cooking the eggs. 1 more click. Okay, you're there.
5 rounds, and that rifle is now zeroed.
Pegler tests the scope on a Soviet Mosin Nagant rifle and notices a big difference right away.
7 ring, 6 o'clock.
The adjustment on these Soviet scopes is an awful lot simpler than on the Mauser. There's no tools involved. I can just do it with my fingers. Makes life a lot easier for the sniper.
9 ring, 4 o'clock. Center, X.
It takes only 3 shots before the Soviet rifle is zeroed.
That's the Mosin zeroed. It was very easy. Just use the adjuster drums. It took me 3 shots, and it's spot on. If for any reason I lose the zero, if I need to return the zero again, it's a very straightforward process. If my life was going to depend on sniping, I think I would probably opt for the Mosin.
The Soviet scope gave Red Army marksmen an advantage. But it doesn't alone explain why Russian snipers were so dominant in Stalingrad.
The Russian sniper had a very profound effect at Stalingrad. The Germans loathed and feared the Soviet snipers. They couldn't get away from it. It didn't matter where they were. A careless movement, just showing your head a little bit too much above a trench, would bring a sniper's bullet.
Many Russian snipers, like the celebrated Vasily Zaitsev, were recruited from remote areas such as Siberia, where marksmanship was vital for hunting. But it seems it was more than just hunters that were involved with shooting in the pre-war years in Russia.
In the 1930s, millions and millions of young Russians, men and women, had gone out to get their sharpshooter badge, which meant you qualified really as an effective sniper. And And when the war came, the Soviet Union had a culture, really, among its young people of shooting with great accuracy.
It was a culture that would prove immensely valuable to the Red Army.
This cult of sniperism grew up mainly through the media. They made their snipers into heroes. They were people who were lauded publicly, given honours and awards, whereas in every other country, the sniper was regarded as rather the dirty dog of war.
With large numbers of experienced sharpshooters using high-quality, simple-to-use scopes, the Red Army inflicted heavy physical and psychological casualties on the Germans.